In a recent article for Forbes, Andy Meek reports that for the first time, Edelman's annual trust barometer revealed that fewer than half of all Americans acknowledge any kind of trust in the mainstream media. 56% of Americans agreed that journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. The results go on to show that 59% agreed that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. And 61% think that the media is not doing well at being objective and nonpartisan. Meek goes on to describe partisan examples of this phenomenon. Liberals, for example, railed at the New York Times Washington correspondent Maggie Haberman for pretty much the entirety of the Trump presidency if she had a piece that dutifully reported some action he'd taken that didn't also find a way to suggest that he was the devil incarnate. Similarly, there's a tendency among many right-leaning consumers of news to regard any updated story containing new facts or a fuller picture emerging in the wake of an initial piece of breaking news to be evidence of some kind of conspiratorial backtracking. These statistics paint an increasingly dire picture of contemporary distrust in news media, and that distrust is hardly confined to American audiences. In a 2019 article for The Guardian titled, "Why Can't We Agree on What's True Anymore?" William Davies describes similar dynamics leading up to the 2016 Brexit referendum. A sense that the game is rigged now fuels public debate, says Davies, before putting the issue in strikingly combative terms. Everyone can point to evidence that justifies their outrage. This arms race in cultural analysis is unwinnable. Davies' metaphor of conflict and combat undergirding our post-truth world makes his analysis of the situation stand out from other similar attempts to grapple with the problem. If we read Davies' article more closely and analyze a few key passages, we find a logic and vocabulary that should be especially interesting to Girardian interpreters. Contrary to initial hype surrounding big data, Davies says, the explosion of information available to us is making it harder, not easier, to achieve consensus on truth. As the quantity of information increases, the need to pick out bite-sized pieces of content rises accordingly. In this radically skeptical age, questions of where to look, what to focus on, and who to trust are ones that we increasingly seek to answer for ourselves without the help of intermediaries. Already our antennas should be raised as Davies makes the present information crisis a mimetic crisis, or a crisis in how the desire for truth is mediated by reporters and journalists. The explosion of information that makes it possible for us to seek answers for ourselves is, Davies says, a liberation of sorts, but it is also at the heart of our deteriorating confidence in public institutions. René Girard recognized the romantic lie of unmediated desire juxtaposed against the scandalous novelistic truth that all desire is mediated. If we apply the same heuristic to the desire for truth in the information age, then we can present Davies' claim in another way. The information explosion of the 21st century has facilitated a retreat back into the romantic lie that our desire for truth is personal and unmediated, and that we can pursue truth in an entirely libertarian quest of acquiring answers. Indeed, Davies argues that our present crisis does not emerge from passively consuming the propaganda of bad actors, but from our very active and skeptical engagement with an overwhelming number of data points and interpretive positions. The propaganda scare, he says, paints the present moment as a moral conflict between truth and lies, with an unthinking public passively consuming the results. But our relationship to information and news is now entirely different. It has become an active and critical one that is deeply suspicious of the official line. Nowadays, everyone is engaged in spotting and rebutting propaganda of one kind or another, curating our news feeds, attacking the framing of the other side, and consciously resisting manipulation. In some ways, we have become too concerned with truth to the point where we can no longer agree on it. The concern with truth that Davies describes, a concern which takes on a combative and suspicious tone, reflects the degree to which our identity formation has become imbricated with truth-seeking. Truth is no longer a common frame of reference which we might build and partake in together, but the endpoint of an active process of identity construction in competition with other frames of reference and so with other identities. The curation of news feeds, for example, becomes a strategy of differentiation. Through it, we emphasize the uniqueness of our individual frames of reference. As such, our post-truth present does not reflect a rejection of truth as a common foundation, but rather a perceived scarcity of truth in the form of quality facts provoking us towards rivalry. Our perception of truth has been perverted by mimetic desire, facilitated in unforeseen ways by information technology, which, Davies explains, has reduced truth to an acquirable object. As many of the original evangelists of big data like to claim, Davies says, when everything is being recorded, our knowledge of the world no longer needs to be mediated by professionals, experts, institutions, and theories. Instead, they argue that the data can simply speak for itself. Patterns will emerge, traces will come to light. This holds out the prospect of some purer truth than the one presented to us by professional editors or trained experts, the ultimate in scientific objectivity. The ability to record information at any moment from our own devices creates an illusion of pure presentation, of the immediate experience of truth. It produces, in the words of surveillance scholar Mark Andreevich, a fantasy of truth unpolluted by any deliberate human intervention. Such a notion of truth is the romantic lie of modern information technology, and this lie covers up a scandalous truth, that the frames journalists and experts use to reduce and organize information are indispensable to its coherence and meaning. What we are discovering, Davies concludes, is that once the limitations on data capture are removed, there are escalating opportunities for conflict over the nature of reality. Framing these conflicts in terms of mimetic desire, we can observe the following. A, when we understand that truth is mediated to us by trusted models and experts whose experiences are close to events, then we experience truth as a shareable good, a frame of reference in which we all participate. But B, when trust in our models diminishes and we further introduce information technologies that promise immediate experiences into the mix, we instead experience truth as an acquirable object for which we compete. Under the illusion that we can have an unmediated relationship with truth, and that nothing is more reliable than our own willful instincts and desires for truth, we lose sight of how we mediate our relationships to information. We carefully curate our news feeds, calling other people sheep for watching CNN while participating in conspiracy theories on Facebook. Our errant obsession with truth has become an identity issue. We define ourselves not by listening to the mainstream or the establishment, claiming to think for ourselves, even as our models for truth become more and more bizarre. We compete for truth, for rightness, for the status of being informed, so that we can accuse others of being deluded and misled. Our claims to having won this competition grow stronger the further our frame of reference differs from the mainstream. In conspiratorial thinking, knowledge thus reduces to gnosis, as the most outlandish hypotheses present as hidden or secret, and so desirable from this competitive standpoint. If unmediated access to truth is the romantic lie of our age, then the question becomes, how might we restore a sense of mediation as a positive good? How might we wake the public back up to the idea that a mediated relationship to truth and reality need not be a mechanism of control or coercion, but can help us form the very frames of reference that make political life possible? We have to recognize that we live in such a chaotic information age. As public policy scholar Bill Adair puts it, people need trusted brokers to help them figure out what's true and what's not. How might we redefine what it means to be a trusted broker of truth? How might we determine the proper boundaries and ethical mediation of information? Several commentators have already proposed answers to this problem, and to their credit, their solutions reflect an understanding of mimetic desire and the need to mediate the public's desire for truth and information. However, several proposed solutions threaten to make the situation even worse by relying on a rather bizarre statistic that, according to the 2020 Run report of the Edelman Trust Barometer, which measures public trust in institutions across 28 countries, Business, of all things, has pulled ahead as the most trusted global institution, above both government and media. On a global average, 76% of respondents report trusting their employer, compared to 53% who trust their government and 51% who trust news media in their country. With those numbers in mind, Axios commentator Felix Salmon suggests that CEOs need to step into a new role, embracing their status as mediators of truth to the public. Business leaders, we are told, must seize upon the mimetic machinery of the present and steer public opinion in the right direction. It is not hard to see, however, that this illusion only further undergirds the American elite as a kind of priestly class, who are already adept at using mimetic forces to sway interpretation towards their personal interests. We might be better off asking, how have business leaders become the mediators they presently are? How have they retained the public faith? And how might our other institutions follow suit towards restoring that faith? Insight from the Radio, Television, Digital News Association can provide us with a few answers in the form of trust indicators emerging across multiple studies into our own ongoing truth crisis. These include demands for accountable leaders, transparency about reporting motives and processes, humility in the face of error, and a greater sense of caring and connection. In other words, that consumers of news media feel cared for by those reporting the facts. Multinational initiatives such as the Trust Project take these indicators seriously and provide newsrooms with the tools to be more deeply engaged and transparent with their audiences. One UK newsroom, the Daily Mirror, saw readers' trust rise 8% after the Mirror plainly posted some key trust indicators on its website. Aaron Sherrittman, executive director at PolitiFact, sees this as an opportunity for journalists to tell their own story for once. We can do a much better job of telling our story, he says. We're good at telling other people's stories, but we sometimes fail to explain what we do. Each of the above solutions to our present crisis understands, to some degree, the mimetic nature of human desire, even when it comes to truth and information. Mobilizing trust in business is one way to take advantage of that reality and steer public opinion, but it ultimately gives even more power to the upper class by making them into information brokers. Initiatives like the Trust Project, meanwhile, seem to understand that how information gets mediated matters, and that it can contribute to deeper public trust or greater conflict and division. However, transparency about bias and motives in the newsroom do not necessarily translate into a more thoughtful or empathetic public. The fact is that the mediated nature of truth remains a scandal to the present day public. As Davies helps us understand, information technology makes it possible for us to retreat into the romantic lie of unmediated truth, thus believing that we can discover secrets that differentiate us from our neighbors. The quest for truth becomes a competition in which everyone pursues a different version of the same object, insisting that they are the only ones pursuing the true prize. Traditional reporting and storytelling will continue to run aground on this essential paradox. Responsible, transformative truth-telling will and must always scandalize, insofar as it reminds us that we do not create our stories so much as we are created by them. What, then, if we were able to embrace this scandal as a public good rather than as something to be avoided? This is the sort of question we're presently asking through the unRival network as we mediate on how to tell the stories of peace builders to skeptical, burnt-out audiences who are yet looking for good news. We've been looking to the present media crisis to ask ourselves what we will not do and how we might bring positive change into a world that is already drowning in content. Our conclusion is that it is not enough to be a trusted broker of information or to responsibly wear the mantle of media mediator for our audience. Rather, the topics of our work, peace-building strategies, and the people undertaking them must exert a mimetic power all their own. This involves more than reporting the facts. It requires the drawing of analogies between global and local, American and cosmopolitan, liberal and conservative. It involves exposing the livable spaces in which those seeking peaceful solutions to violent situations can imitate one another at small scale or large in spirit and in truth. We believe it is time for the crucial work of telling unfinished stories, which audiences are invited to continue and complete by changing their own lives. Such stories offer a new common ground and frame of reference, not on the foundation of identity, of what we do or do not believe compared to the beliefs of others, but rather of becoming. How, we ask, are we changing in response to common experiences of success, failure, and struggle that collectively make up our truth? We believe that indexing such life changes through our storytelling does more good than simply reporting on peace efforts. Telling such stories contributes to transcending oppositional identities. By studying the global crisis of trust in the media, we can better identify the needs of an open and convertible audience among those who feel displaced and scandalized by news reporting and information technology. By understanding and embracing the scandalous nature of mimesis and the potential upshots of the acquisitive desire for truth, we can tell a new story and provide a new frame of reference.